Hello everyone, my name is Paul Hertzik and I'm a horticultural seed technician at Seeds of Diversity Canada. We're located in Waterloo and we've been operating a seed library now for about 20 years, and in the last 5 years or so it's really expanded and grown. And today what I'm going to do is share with you some of the techniques and practices that we use. And so the purpose of this video is to provide you with a general overview of how to operate and set up your own seed bank or seed library. The first thing I want to discuss is drying seeds. Typically at Seeds of Diversity, we are sent seeds that are already dried, and so this first step is not something we often do. However, it's not out of the ordinary for us to do it as well. So it's very simple. All you need is some screens or trays, and you'll lay out the seeds that you've received in a thin layer. Indoors is best. And within 1 to 3 days, the seeds should be dry enough to start working with them. This will depend on the humidity and temperature where you're drying the seeds though. So level 1, or temporary storage, what you'll need for this is to dry the seeds as above on trays or screens. And after 1 to 3 days, you can store these seeds in paper envelopes or paper bags, but not in jars or anything airtight yet, as they'll still need a few more weeks to continue to slowly dry. Permanent storage, or level 2 storage as we call it, requires one extra step. After the seeds have dried for 1 to 3 days and continue to dry for a couple of weeks in paper bags, you'll use silica gel to dry the seeds fully for another 2 to 3 days. And this is to prepare the seeds to be frozen so that they're not damaged during that process. I'm going to quickly explain how we at Seeds of Diversity dry seeds using silica gel. The materials or the equipment that you'll need is obviously silica gel, large clear plastic bags, very important that they're clear, a bungee cord, and a large plastic bin or a smaller bin if that suits your needs. The first thing to do is take the bin and fill the bottom with silica gel. Typically you want equal weight of silica gel and seeds, so fill it accordingly. Next, place the sorted or labeled seeds in the bottom of the bin, and I'll go over sorting and labeling in a minute. If you have a large amount of seeds, you can leave them in the jars that you're using with the lids open, or if you have a small amount of seeds, which is more typical for us, you can place them in envelopes and then inside of jars. However, when you're drying the seeds, you need to remove the envelopes from the jars so that they dry evenly. Always make sure that there is something between the seed and the silica gel. The seed should never rest directly on the silica gel. Once the seeds are in the bin, pull the plastic clear bag over top, and you want to try to get an airtight seal. This is very important so that the environment inside the bin can be properly dehydrated without having more air escape into the bin. You can use the bungee cords to seal it if you don't have an appropriate size bin and bag. It's also very important that you must be able to reach into the bin with your hand over top of the plastic bag. This is important because you're going to seal the seeds inside the jar before you remove the plastic bag. Lastly, you're going to want to make sure that there's an airtight seal around the bin. The way that you can do this is just slightly pulling on the bag, and it should form a vacuum inside of the bin. So typically you'll wait anywhere from 3 to 5 days. Again, this will depend on how humid the environment you're working in is and how dry the seeds were when you put them into the bin. The last step is to seal the jars. So what you'll do is reach into the bag, put the lids back on the jars or the envelopes back into the jars and then the lids, and screw them tight or snap them shut, and then remove the bag, and your jars are properly dehydrated with the seeds inside at appropriate levels of humidity and dryness that they can be frozen now. One important consideration when we're discussing seeds is how you'll divide the seeds that you receive, and each seed bank or seed library will be different. At Seeds of Diversity, we divide them 3 ways. 1/3 we put into temporary storage to use as a working collection, and these seeds are used to send out to growers, to run germ tests on, and to use at events. We take another 1/3 and we put them in permanent storage. So we go through that process of drying them with silica gel, and then we put them in a walk-in freezer at one of our locations at Everdale. These seeds typically we don't want to touch for 10 plus years, and they're meant as more of a backup in case something happens to the seeds in the working collection. The last portion of them we donate to Plant Gene Resources of Canada, which operates a seed library or a seed bank out in Saskatoon, and it's Canada's national seed bank. So they're stored at a very excellent level, and they're more of the catastrophe scenarios, what we call it, in case something were to happen to the freezer and the working collection. We'll still have a backup of these, but they're not accessible at all to us. So I'm going to walk you through the intake system, or what we do at Seeds of Diversity when we receive seeds. The required items for processing and taking in seeds: we use coin envelopes, number 1 and number 3. We have 2 different scales, one for large and one for small amounts of seeds. A tape, pen, gloves, which is optional if you want to handle the seeds, and of course jars. We use a whole bunch of different kinds of jars. Typically, the snap shut jars we use for permanent storage in the freezer, and the screw cap jars we use for temporary storage. The first thing we do when seeds are mailed into the office is we place them all into a bin to keep them organized. These seeds that you can see here on the screen all have the original information from the different growers that have sent them to us. Next, we'll open each envelope, divide them 3 ways, and create our own labels for them, as well as weighing them. After they've been labeled and placed into envelopes, we'll group the envelopes together by accession number or by the order that they came in, and these are placed into jars. Some of them are placed into jars immediately, some of them need to be dried, and some of them need to be dried with silica gel before they can go into the jar. And on the screen here you can see a collection of seeds in envelopes and a jar with the range of accession numbers that are contained within it. Once we have seeds in jars, or seeds in envelopes in jars, we place them into labeled boxes, and these are how we track where each one is stored. On the picture on the left is a picture of our temporary storage area, which is located in our office, and you can see how each jar has a label and each box is also labeled. Just a quick note on containers for seed storage. The screw cap mason jars are really the simplest and best way, and it's what we recommend these are kept in if possible. It keeps the seeds dry, cooled if they're somewhere that is refrigerated, safe from insects and pests, and protects the seeds at a reasonable cost. The glass jars with the clamp down lids are better for long-term storage. The seal is a little bit better on them. They last longer and they don't crack when they're frozen. Next, I'm going to talk briefly about seed storage. So where you want to put your seeds once you've dried them. So to store seeds for any length of time, you want to keep them as dry and as cold as possible, but dry is more important than cold. A rule of thumb you can use is the temperature in Fahrenheit plus the relative humidity of the room should be less than 100. So for example, if it's 30% humidity and the temperature is less than 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 Celsius, it would be a good condition to keep your seeds in. If you're able to refrigerate your seeds, they'll typically last about twice as long. However, it's very important that they're sealed in an airtight jar, as fridges are very humid and this will damage the seed. Of course, seeds last the longest if they're frozen. Again, it's very important that the seeds are properly dehydrated. If they're not properly dehydrated and too much water remains in the seed, then this will freeze. It'll form sharp crystals and crack the cells, which will completely ruin the seeds. So that's not what you want to happen. So as I mentioned earlier, Seeds of Diversity has 3 levels of storage. The temporary one, these seeds, if they're dried when they come in, are typically put into the jars in the first 2 weeks, and this is used to distribute or regrow in 5 years. The permanent storage are dried with silica gel, typically not accessed for 10 years, and the PGRC seeds are typically not accessed at all, and they're just a backup for our own system. These are just a few pictures of what our temporary storage area looks like. So you can see each box here has a label on it. The letter C or D or E corresponds to the size of the jar, and the number is just the sequential number of how many boxes we have of that particular size of jar. This is some pictures of our permanent storage facility, which is located at Everdale in a walk-in freezer. All the jars are snapshot jars, so they're stored in the same boxes and same jars. Again, the labels are for tracking where each jar went. Just another note on frozen storage. Almost all of seeds can be stored with minimal damage as long as they're well dried. Freezing seeds does cause a small decline in the germination rate, but this decline outweighs the loss of germination you would have if you stored them without freezing them for a long period of time. So if the intention is to store the seed for 5 years to 20 years, frozen storage is the best bet. When you're removing seeds from the frozen storage, you want to typically take them out and put them in a shaded and cool place. The condensation is normal to form on the outside of the jar, but you should scratch it away and check that there's no condensation on the inside of the jar. If there is, then that means the seeds or the air in the jar wasn't properly dehydrated and could mean a substantial loss in the germination rate. After that, typically leave the seeds in the jars and maybe for 1 day, and then they're okay to work with. Refreezing them is fine afterwards. The seed will suffer a small loss of germination, so it's best to try not to access your frozen seeds very often. These should really be for long-term storage that you don't intend to use. Okay, onto processing and labeling. So at Seeds of Diversity, we say we have collections of boxes of jars of envelopes, which sounds like a mouthful, but it's really not too difficult. Basically, every seed collection site has a number. Every box has a size and number, and every jar has a letter. Some jars contain just seeds, some jars contain envelopes with seeds. So for example, on our database, you might see the location as 01E13-D. This means that it's located at the Seed Library Seeds of Diversity in Waterloo. That's the 01. E13 refers to the box number, so we know that's the Bernardin 1 liter standard wide mouth jar. And then we look for the jar marked D in that box, which will either contain just the one variety of seed or envelopes of seeds. As for labeling, information is labeled on the seed containers, whether that's the jars, the bags, or the envelopes, and it's also duplicated somewhere else. Typically, we'll write right on the envelopes or the bag, but we'll use a slip of paper and put that inside the jar, not on the outside. The secondary place to label or to store the information can be a spreadsheet, a database, a binder, whatever you think is necessary. The minimum info on the label is the variety name, the year the seeds were harvested, and a code to look up the info. So we use an accession number or an inventory number, and with that alone we can pull up all the other information on the seed. So the variety name is really more of a backup in case that number can't be read or it's damaged somehow. This is just a small example of a typical seed envelope that we'll have at Seeds of Diversity. So the top number there is the accession number, then you have the crop, tomato, and the variety name, which is indigo rose. The total seed weight in the envelope is 1.5 grams. 2012 was the year it was harvested, and Urban Harvest was the grower or where we got the seeds from. You can choose to include this information on yours or more or less. It's up to you. Lastly, I want to quickly discuss germination tests because this is the best way to track and monitor the rate of germination, obviously, of your seeds, the viability of the seeds, and it's an excellent indicator of the quality of the seed as well. Additionally, when you compare germination tests over time to the same seed that you have in storage, this can be used to indicate how well you're storing the seeds. And if there's a substantial loss in the germination of the seed, that might indicate that there's something wrong with the process you're using. The threshold for regeneration is 85% of the initial germination rate. So this is why we recommend that anytime you're sent a seed sample, you should run germination tests on it. For example, if a certain seed sample had an initial germination rate of 95%, we would regrow it when it reaches 80.75%. The simplest way to do a germination test is to select about 100 seeds if you have at least 1,000 total, or 10% of the available seeds that you have, and place them in rows on a moist paper towel. Roll up the paper towel and place it into a paper bag in a warm place. Every 2 to 3 days, open up the bag, look at the paper towel, count how many seeds have germinated, and you can remove them, and if it needs it, re-moisten the paper towel. You can wait anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks and then tally the total number of sprouted seeds and then calculate the percentage of germination. So obviously if 9 out of 10 seeds sprouted, you'd have 90% germination rate. Then record this information where you need to in your database or spreadsheet and use it to link that seed sample with how the viability of it is. That's everything I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope this was helpful, and I enjoyed giving this brief presentation on setting up your own seed bank. Thank you.